From Inwood, New York City, welcome to Inwood Art Works on Air. It's where I meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes who make their home what we affectionately call Upstate Manhattan. I'm your host, Aaron Sims, and today we welcome local artist Howard Better. Howard attended Pratt Institute and California Institute of the Arts in the late 70s, and his art-making career has mostly involved moving images. First using 16mm film, then video and digital images. His movies have been made to be projected on unusual surfaces, such as the side of a cliff or in the corner of a room. He has spent 2 decades doing freelance animation, mostly working on Sesame Street and other similar shows. He began teaching video and animation classes in the early 90s and has taught 3D computer animation to college students, but he professes his real love is stop motion animation. In recent years, he's been working primarily with special ed students. Howard began working with collage objects about 20 years ago and has an ongoing installation in various locations around Upper Manhattan. He has shown his work at several times up in Yonkers, the Soapbox Gallery in Brooklyn, La Petite Versailles in the East Village, and at the Trofano Gallery in Cobleskill, New York. He is currently working on an ongoing series of collages called Wallpaper, which are used to cover walls of large spaces. We're going to talk to him about his work and so much more, but first, thank you, Howard, for joining us today in Inwood Art Works on Air. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
You bet. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good.
Good. Good. Glad to have you.
Beautiful spring day.
Yes, it is.
Everything's blooming.
Yes. And it's springtime for artwork, I guess, right? Coming up. There are a lot of good opportunities for art in the neighborhood. Howard, you might be the most famous artist in Inwood. And I say that without any hyperbole whatsoever, because one can easily walk down Broadway and see your work either dangling or installed in various open public spaces, the old Twin Donut space, all around. And you've been doing this for a long time. So I wanted to ask you, why do you feel the need to create and share your work with the community? Like, what prompts you to do that?
Well, I like the idea of showing work to people who don't normally go into art venues and who just kind of like let it become part of their lives, especially because it's there day after day and it's aging. All the art goes through a transformation when it gets placed outdoors. The sun is intense to my images. It blues them out. They get washed out and, over time. And then I replace them. I add other layers of image on top. I do collage. So I'm pasting images on top of other images, mixing up. My whole idea is mixing different bits of the kind of stuff that we've all been exposed to, all our lives. So it's going back and looking at what has come down to us. It's a collaborative effort. You say I'm the most famous artist. People don't know who I am. They know the work because the work is there. My name isn't really on much of it.
No, it's not.
So I'm not advertising. I'm trying to have the work be the link that ties things together, rather than who I am. Which
I just happen to know who you are. That's
I know.
That's how I know your work's everywhere.
I also see it very much as a collaboration between me and everything that comes my way, all the materials, because I use people's junk that they throw out. And I take it and I reshape it and I transform it and I chop it up. I just was at the MoMA last night. There's this great room full of all the early Cubist stuff in one room, all jammed together. It's a very intense experience.
I hope you didn't chop that stuff up either.
No, I didn't. Okay. I mean, if a book came my way within a minute, I probably would. If because I love including Cubist stuff into it. Because the Cubist viewpoint is one of the things that I feel like I need to keep developing. I feel like a lot of the role that I have is to develop things that maybe didn't go all the way when such as psychedelic art. I'm in that mindset, And I feel like, yeah, where does this go now? I mean, because where are we, we're mind explorers. That's what I see myself as, playing around. Me and everybody else that I come in contact with, really, we're all trying to figure out, what is this thing that we're inside of, and what are these thoughts we're having, and who, what is the connection between my thoughts and your thoughts, all of that.
Yeah.
And so when I put up this stuff in the neighborhood, it's for people to go inside of with their minds and play around and play. It's play.
Yeah.
It's childlike. I work with children. I'm a teacher. I do after-school programs with third graders. Right now, my job has finally got to the point where I'm teaching third graders stop-motion animation, and I love it. It's really cool. But I've taught in the schools for 20 years, basically, more than that maybe, all different levels, kindergarten up to college, in various places all over the city. My jobs, because I've never been an official teacher, but I work for teaching organizations, so I get to go into the outer boroughs, into all corners of the Bronx and Brooklyn, and I love it. I love to explore. I love to, explore the neighborhoods and when I was making movies, I made one in particular, a full-length movie of all the places I was going to, chopped up, kind of a collage movie. A lot of my movies are collages, really. Whether they be, there's some live action and there's some animation and there's some mixed. But I had a whole movie period where I was focused on that. I started off with 16 millimeter movie. It's my education back in late 70s. Did a process called optical printing, if you're familiar with that, which is rephotographing film, and that's how I combined a lot of my imagery. And now with the digital world, it's great. Life is a lot easier. It's easier to to do a lot of things that I couldn't do before, and I could do a lot of things. I re-edited many of my early movies once I got digital because I could do things I couldn't do before. Too complicated to deal with the labs and all that. If you ever did that kind of from that era. I'm glad that's over, although I enjoy
it's a lot cheaper
but
now.
It's so beautiful to look at a 16 millimeter image on projected through a projector.
Well, that's why people advertise. Like, do you remember when things were being put out on 16 millimeter originally? No one advertised on 16 millimeter. Now, when someone shows something on 16 millimeter, they advertise it is.
Mm-hmm. I respect people who still work with film.
So
I
my
really
point is,
do.
I think there's something to that, right?
I wouldn't do it anymore. I couldn't afford to do it anymore.
Yeah.
But somehow I did it back, and I was a cab driver. The whole time I was a freelance animator, I was also a cab driver. So for 20 years, my
I was
early...
going to say, I bet you've had some really interesting jobs over the years.
Yeah, well, that was my longest running. For almost 20 years, I occasionally drove a taxi and, yellow cab downtown, nighttime. Mostly in the 80s, but also into the 90s. And then my teaching jobs took over and my animation jobs stopped coming because of the digital stuff. Because my animation stuff was mostly pre-digital, but once it came in, for instance, I did a lot of work for Sesame Street, but then at a certain point, they started having in-house animators, and so there was no more work coming to me and many other freelance animators in the city at the time.
Yeah, that's wild. I mean... but you got to do what you got to do to make ends meet.
Yeah,
though,
but then teaching jobs started, and everyone needed to. And you had the tools; people wanted to learn it. So
right. So you're teaching, but you're not. Are you licensed through DOE then to go in and teach? Or
I've had licenses. I've had a substitute license. I've never had a full teaching license. But I work for teaching organizations, mostly art-centered ones. But I worked for a few different ones, and it supported me over the years.
Did you have like a specific mentor or anybody, like a teacher yourself, when you were younger that exposed you to collage and like
well, my uncle
or free thinking, if you will?
My uncle was an art teacher at Bayside High School, and he's the one who first exposed me to collage. But I've had great teachers over the years. I've just been in good schools, and which makes a difference. And I've been very lucky to come across these amazing teachers. And I really, got a lot from them. They shaped me.
Yeah,
but
I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, can you tell us a bit about your collage work, particularly your wallpaper project, and how you place objects in an environment that prompts interaction with the art? Mm-hmm. That's what you have up right now. I believe the old Twin Donut location.
Right. Well, let me start by saying most of the collage stuff I was focused on were the cans before.
Yes, sure.
And then at a certain point, I decided, I had them hanging for years at Indian Road Cafe before
you
it was
did, right in the window there.
And then it became Inwood Farm, and my relationship with them changed.
Right.
But at a certain point, I decided I wanted people to be able to pick them up. That was how they were best viewed, because I did collages inside the cans as well as the outside. So I meant it was nice to be able to, and that's when COVID hit and nobody wanted to touch anything.
You're right.
And so I started focusing more on this wallpaper stuff, flat stuff that I can put up. Yes, I have the corner there, Twin Donut, I've covered their windows, and I'm about to take those down and put up a whole new set because
Okay.
I have tons of this stuff. I'm a workaholic, and I work constantly. I don't know if I'm always.
I see, because I walk that corner. Not that I don't work the corner, folks, but I walk the corner, and I see you out walking too. Like, there's people you walk around the neighborhood, you see people out all the time, and you're one of the people I see out all the time walking, and I feel like I do things that I see the world different than you do, of course, because you were just talking about it. But I do see space, and I always see how I could possibly use space, and it's to me, it's like, how do we use that? How can we use that to create? I'm more performing arts minded, but sometimes I think about visual installations, but at the same time, but like how it could be actually physically used. And so I think we have that in common, and because this neighborhood just presents a host of possibilities.
Sure. My focus is not on the individual pieces; it's on the environment I could create with an installation.
Yeah.
So when the reason I'm all over Inwood is because I'm trying to create this environment that has links. In my past, I've been doing art since the 70s, and it's always been dissatisfying because I'd have a nice show here, a nice show there, and I never felt a connection. And people saw that show, didn't see that show.
Right.
It was just in Inwood. What's nice is that it's continuous. It continues, and people are immersed in it. Kind of. Not that I don't want to be overbearing or I lived in the East Village in the early '80s, and I got sick of all the garbage that you felt like you were surrounded by garbage. So by the time I moved up here and started having kids, I was glad to be up here.
Yeah.
As a place where so I don't want to. I'm not trying to create that kind of an atmosphere.
Right.
But I do think that having art on the street is interesting, and it worked out very nicely during COVID. Unfortunately for COVID, but for us all suffering with the COVID thing.
Right.
But I was able to set up in all these vacant storefronts because there were many of them, and nobody bothered it. I put my stuff up, and I had it up for a few years, and a lot of them subsequently came down,
Sure.
but there's still a few up scattered all here and there.
Right.
And then I have these key places like Bruce's Garden and Twin Donut, where I'm welcomed, and I could have an art. I like to update the work I have up because things, like I say, things age in the sun and the rain. And I have so much, and things get stolen or borrowed which I don't mind at all. As long as it's not thrown out. I don't care if anybody takes stuff that I have on the street and keeps it, but if they throw it out, or just,
sure, of
just
course.
vandalize it, that
doesn't help.
Because
anybody.
I don't mind sharing it in that way. If anybody likes it enough to take it, it's fine with me.
Wow, how about that, folks? Get your own Howard Better personalized thing. Just grab it and go. Ease of mind.
It's okay with me. Yeah.
It's okay with him. Do you think a gallery would work up here?
We've had a few. Diane had on Nina's
Cooper.
side. She gave me some. She was the first person that I started actually showing it and made me comfortable
How's
with
she
the
been?
idea.
I haven't seen her for years.
Yeah, she's around still, but she had that nice little gallery.
Yeah.
Sold jewelry and stuff, but also showed people's artwork.
Right.
And she gave me confidence, by showing it and saying, yes, you can do this. You can.
It's
show
great
it.
having that champion people, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
then in Indian Road Cafe, Jason gave me total freedom to show stuff there. And then Aaron up at Bruce's Garden lets me play around in there as much as I want.
It's great.
So, it's nice to have those, opportunities. Yeah, so I'm about to redo the Twin Donut window. So that's going to be all new stuff this week. I hope to do it.
Okay.
And
well, folks, get ready.
Yeah.
Hang out on Broadway in 218. You're going to see some new things.
At a certain point, you say, "Why? What do I have?" Because
Right.
I'm looking for a really big space. I had a really good show up in Cobleskill, but who goes to Cobleskill? And I had
People
all
in
my
Cobleskill do.
wallpaper. But I had a nice show, and I had like a dozen people looking at it.
Right.
And it was up for a year.
Right.
But it was a nice show because I finally covered all the walls of a really big space with the wallpaper I want, and it was great for me because it was great validation because it worked. It was like, I wasn't sure how it would work to be overwhelmed by this stuff. And I really like the way it is. So I'm looking for a space. I'm looking at the space we're in right now.
Right. Well, that's a good thing. You kind of keep, you're relentless and you're.
I am. I'm kind of,
You're a sick man, Howard.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a compliment.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's healthy. I don't
It
think
is.
it's
100%.
not. Yeah,
No,
I'm making art.
And you keep learning about yourself. You keep learning about the world you're in, and
Mm-hmm.
how. And I love how you said earlier. It's about you place objects in an environment that prompts interaction with that art in the environment itself, and I think that's really great.
Yeah, people got to figure out, how could this make sense?
Yeah.
Because a lot of it, how does it, even its existence make sense? What are these cans hanging
Right.
from trees or hanging from storefront? Why cans? There's a lot of reasons, but,
What does it mean to you?
Well, it started off with me because you can spin it, and it was like little movies, so it was very much tied to my movie thing.
Yeah.
But then it was also playing with labels. It really started off that way. It was like putting different, contrasting mass production idea with the fact that everyone is different, and there's so many out there, so it's playing off the,
Right.
the Andy Warhol pop art thing,
Got it.
as a starting point, but it certainly,
No, it's
goes,
unique.
but then becomes an object totally on its own, especially when you start collaging the inside of the can and all that. It's like becomes this, does this object make sense at all? But then you start to look at the images and try to make sense out of, your own sense. And there's no absolute,
Sure.
this is the way that,
How do
this
you
is the
respond?
story I'm trying to tell. There's a lot of stories in there and there's a lot of comments in there, and there's a lot of chance elements, because who knows what I'm going to get. That's what's so exciting. You don't know what you can get. When I get new stuff and start cutting it up. But also I have big bins full of old stuff because of all the stuff I've been using, and I keep going through it. And I feel like, all right, I've gone through this a million times, and then I go through it and I look at it. I have totally fresh eyes, and I see, and I get my scissors out and I start cutting away. Scissors, I love cutting. The scissors are a wonderful tool. You can just,
I love it.
shape. It's like drawing a painting, but with scissors.
Yeah. That's it's true. Well, it's collage in its finest form. So you have wallpaper project coming up, and then do you have any film projects coming up, by any chance?
I keep making. It got to the point with movies now that I make these little 1-minute Instagram movies and I put them up, and they seem to be, because my movies tend to be a lot of little movies that get joined together anyway.
Yes.
That's been my my story with how I've been always put together my movies. I do little bits and find links between them, and somehow the 1-minute Instagram movies work really well.
That's short attention span theater right now. Everyone that's what everyone's at.
And I stopped playing with sound. I used to do sound, try to make full movies. I don't look at it that way. I know I'm a visual artist more than, and I love sound too, but I'm not interested in doing it at this point. I'm more interested in just pure visuals, and it's fun to make the collages move.
I think that's great, man. Well, I want to say thank you for all you do, and you have someone who appreciates it right
Thank
here.
you. Thank you.
We look forward to seeing more of your work out there. Do you have any advice for those artists out there like yourself, working relentlessly and trying to make things happen?
Yeah, just keep doing it. Even if you don't feel like doing it, just start doing it, because sooner or later, when you start to find your rhythm and start to find the flow, you'll be glad you did it. Because it's makes you happy.
Well, I mean, I can't think of any better reason than that. Well, Howard, it's a pleasure speaking with you. Where can people go to find more about your work and maybe see some of those 1-minute movies?
Howard Better on Instagram. There's a bunch of them up. I have a lot on YouTube.
Okay.
Most of the longer ones. You got to dig around. I have trouble accessing but if you find one, you usually can find other. There's a playlist. I think it's H Better videos or Howard Better videos. But if you play around and leave the space out between my name, usually they'll come up. Unfortunately, every time you put in Howard Better, all this Howard Stern stuff comes up. So I don't know how to get right to my stuff.
Right.
I've never figured that out.
Maybe you should create your own channel. You can create your own channel on YouTube.
I'd have the H Better video. Yeah,
that's your channel.
Once you find one, then you can find them all, basically.
Got it. There you go. So find the H Better video.
Yeah.
We'll figure.
Or Howard Better video.
We'll search and find it.
But they're in there. They're in there. I wanted to get them in there so that
Yeah, of course.
Just so they're somewhere.
Well, that's the thing is, if you don't do it, you won't get seen. So you got to do it, right?
Yeah, they're there. They're
Very
there.
good. Well, listeners and viewers, you have your marching orders to walk the streets of Inwood and find Howard's work in probably the most unusual places. And again, go online. So,
can I just mention the
please, go ahead.
gazebo in Bruce's Garden?
Yep.
Is a real good starting point.
You can start there. Nadima Agard is one of the curators of that, and
she calls it the gazebo gallery.
yes, the gallery in the gazebo, I believe. believe it is.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I've actually helped her put work up there in the past pre-COVID, and I'm so glad there's places like that for, again, more outlets for our visual artists are needed in this neighborhood. And so thank them for that too. So Howard, it's been a pleasure having you here.
Thank you
So much for making the time.
Thanks.
You bet. So once again, folks, this is Inwood Art Works on Air. It's where we meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes to make their home here in Upper Manhattan. If you have a moment, please show us some love right now and rate and review this podcast 5 stars on whatever platform you're listening to. Many thanks to Good Shepherd here for hosting us and to HideSites.com for Uptown promotional support. You can support On Air and all of our programming making a tax-free donation to inwoodartworks.nyc/donate. Follow us on social media. Keep up all we do, which includes the Inwood Film Festival, Filmworks Al Fresco, live performances, and so much more at Inwood Art Works. Inwood Art Works On Air is proud to be supported in part by public funds, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, in partnership with the City Council, and Inwood Art Works programming is made possible by the New York State Council on the Arts with the support of the Office of the Governor and the New York State Legislature. From the top of Manhattan and the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much for tuning in. This is Aaron Sims for Inwood Art Works On Air.